reading this morning comes from chapter 4, verses 1 to 20. Again he began to teach beside the sea. Such a very large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat on the sea and sat there. While the whole crowd was beside the sea on the land, he began to teach them many things in parables. And in his teaching he said to them, "Listen, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it. Other seed fell on rocky ground, where it did not have much soil, and it sprang up quickly, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. Other seed fell among thorns, and thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. Other seed fell into good soil and brought forth grain, growing up and increasing and yielding 30 and 60 and 100-fold. And he said, "Let anyone with ears to hear listen." When he was alone, those who were around him along with the 12 asked him about the parables. And he said to them, "To you has been given the secret of the kingdom of God. But for those outside, everything comes in parables, in order that they may indeed look, but not perceive, and may indeed listen, but not understand, so that they may not turn again and be forgiven." And he said to them, "Do you not understand this parable? Then how will you understand all the parables? The sower sows the word. These are the ones on the path where the word is sown. When they hear, Satan immediately comes and takes away the word that is sown in them. And these are the ones sown on rocky ground. When they hear the word, they immediately receive it with joy, but they have no root and endure only for a while. Then, when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately they fall away. And others are those sown among the thorns. These are the ones who hear the word, but the cares of the world and the lure of wealth and the desire for other things come in and choke the word, and it yields nothing. And these are the ones sown on the good soil. They hear the word and accept it and bear fruit, 30 and 60 and 100-fold.
So we're going to get feedback.
Okay. That's if I'm on the air. Am I on the air?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
just turn you up.
all right. A couple of announcements first. There has been a little bit of confusion about the church annual meeting, and apparently it is still at 1:30 this afternoon. So you got time to go home and have your sausage and come back.
You might push it twice, you might go on mute.
Okay.
Switch on, it's not coming through.
Okay.
Just push the front button once again.
Yep. It's off. Push it again, and it's on.
Try now.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
He doesn't need a mic, although we need to.
You can hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now we're on. Now the other thing is on Friday, the March the 5th, which is next Friday, is the World Day of Prayer at St Nicholas Anglican Church, Barclay Street, Mordialloc, at 2 o'clock. And if you're coming, see Coralie, the good-looking lady who's over here, and she needs to know if you're coming or not. So, the summary of the parable of the sower of the seed. When we were at Wollongong Church, we calculated, this might surprise you, but in order for the church to grow numerically, we had to add 70 people a year, because that was the number we would lose. And there was a larger church, but people came and go, people moved in and out of the area, and for various reasons they'd leave. And for the church to continue just to maintain where it was, we had to add 70 people a year. And we've got to ask ourselves, why did the early church keep this parable? This might surprise you, but actually the early church produced the Bible. The church existed before the Bible did, before the New Testament did. And why did they keep it? Because the church lost a lot of people. Persecution really cleaned it out. They were persecuted by the Romans and sometimes by the Jews, and they needed to add their numbers. People could come along to the church out of curiosity. What's this Christianity all about? And sometimes people try to mix their faith up, the Christian faith, with other faiths as well, and see it didn't work, and therefore they bail out. So this parable was very important for the early church. Now, a sower went out to sow, and gardening is a very frustrating business. Marge, just from where you were going, you're sitting, what are the things that are sort of you find frustrating about your tomatoes and your zucchini and all that type of thing?
I'll stand up. Do we have any other keen growers here? Good on you. Well, I don't know. He hasn't talked to me about this. He's a great husband. By the way, today, Tim, we just had a big celebration for him yesterday, so he must have forgotten to tell me.
It starts it's worth sitting.
Yeah, going downhill. Gardening. I know that you have to prepare your soil first before you do anything. I don't think this reader did, so I'm going to pinch your bit of your sermon. Then I grow from seed, so you have to nurture them, watch them, water them, tend them, make sure they're separated and thinned. And when you plant them, then you've got to remember sometimes to feed them every now and then and stake them and care for them. I know it's a constant job, but I love it. It's caring the thing. But sometimes they disappoint you. And for no reason, they'll go brown and curl up and die. And then they'll get a virus and a spot and whatever. And you've got to keep treating them, looking after them. But then finally, there are some that bear beautiful fruit. And I don't know if none of you are my Facebook friend at the moment, but I've been putting on pictures of my fridge full. I've got 2 fridges. I had to buy another one. My fridge is full of tomatoes and zucchinis, and I've given them away to as many people. But I know that the sower doesn't always know whether he's going to be successful. You just got to.
Slugs and snails?
Oh, I forgot about those. And we cannot put down anything because we nearly killed our dog once because he got into some snail bait. So, yes, you have to do preventative measures and really tend your plants and then thank God for what happens in the end.
Yeah, but it can be very frustrating. And not every seed actually grows. Now, let me use Ian as an example. I don't know when it was, Ian, but some years ago, you decided as a missionary outreach thing, you would distribute pamphlets. What year was it? 1850? 1950?
No, I'm not as young as what you are. It would be about 5 years back.
Okay. And
Yes, it would be about 5 years back.
every house in this area was covered with pamphlets advertising the church. And the only response that we got as a church was someone who objected to the pamphlet being put in their letterbox. And a sower went out to sow. Ian?
We got 4 responses.
Yeah.
1 was positive. Sorry, 2 were positive. 2 were very negative.
Okay, all right. And limited response. And you think to yourself, you've done the right thing, you've sown the seed and a limited response to it. Now, just as a diversion, let me pick up the point that Lyle made. That Jesus spoke in terms that people could understand. He was speaking to people who were interested in agrarian things. He spoke in their language. And as he was speaking about a sower going out to sow, people would immediately identify with it because that was very, very familiar to them. And it raises the question about biblical preaching. And I hear some people claiming that they preach from the Bible. One guy I know who said he's going to preach on every chapter and every verse in the Bible. And then someone calculated that it would take him 22 years to do that, and his ministry didn't last 22 years. Now, another guy I know spent a whole year just taking the church through Romans. Biblical preaching. No, it's not. If you're going to be biblical, you are going to be doing the Jesus thing. You're going to be telling stories, and you are going to be speaking in a language that people understand. For example, if Jesus was here today and he was talking about sowing seed, he'd talk about a guy making 150 calls from a call centre. Do you get those calls? Solar panels or electricity or different types of lights and all that type of thing. Because he knows in making 150 calls, he might get one sucker to answer. And that's the way Jesus would speak. And the other thing that we need to understand about biblical preaching is that people need to understand it. There's no use speaking for a year on Romans that people just goes over their head and they're not with you. And not only do people need to understand, but people who are new to the church need to understand. And I think I've said this to you, one of the greatest compliments I ever had about my preaching was when it was a baptismal service and some Uncle Fred came along and had never been to church before. And at the door, he said to me, I understood every word that you said. And I thought, thank God for that. That is biblical preaching. Well, some just withered up. Some seed fell on the path. And as you're familiar with the common scenes, common pictures, it was a broadcast method. You put your hand in the bag of seed and you chuck it out all over the place. And on Wednesday at the lunch, Lyle was saying that today the sowing seed is much more scientific, much more exact, but there was always a loss in Jesus' time. Now, let's go back to Ian's letterbox drop. And we imagine a guy coming to the letterbox and opening it up. Then there's a pamphlet from the Kmart, and there's a pamphlet from the church. Oh, that's interesting, he says. Good on the church. He screws up the pamphlet from the church, and screws up the pamphlet from the Kmart, and throws it in the letterbox. The seed sort of attracts a minimum of interest. Well, we had a sign outside our church when we were interstate that said, a church that anyone can come to. And people would drive past, oh, good for them. I hope they make it. Or I think of a funeral. I think of a funeral that was having and was talking about the guy who had died. And then I got to the point where I felt that I needed to share something of my faith, and I'd do that in a funeral service in 2 or 3 minutes. And I could sense a lady up the back yawning her head off. This was the boring bit as far as she was concerned. And she was almost saying to me, hurry up and press the button, get on with it. Now, that actually happened in the time of Jesus, that people would hear it and immediately dismiss it. Jesus performs a great miracle on the Sabbath. And this is the response. The Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. The message is heard and it passes by immediately. Some seed fell on rocky soil. And as he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path and the birds came up and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. Now, in Marge's escapades in the garden, she was going to plant some sweet peas, which is absolutely useless. You can't eat them, but she was going to plant them. You like sweet peas?
I'm wanting to, but I'm not giving much help.
No. Marge got the fork out and she dug into the ground and immediately found underneath the ground that she was going to use, you found
Concrete.
concrete. And you couldn't see it until you dug down. Now that's exactly what it was like in Palestine. There were parts of the soil where it wasn't just rocky ground, the rock was underneath the ground and you couldn't see it, and you didn't have the plough there